All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Raise Money from Individuals. My name is Sarah Jo Neubauer. I'm the Capacity and Leadership Development Manager based in the Foundation Center, San Francisco. And I suspect some of you may be joining us today, maybe new to the Foundation Center and our work. So I'd just like to take a brief second to share with you a little bit about the Foundation Center and our mission and our goals. The Foundation Center is a national nonprofit organization, and our mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge about philanthropy in the United States and around the world. And one way we accomplish our mission is through educating thousands of people each year through a full curriculum of training courses, both in the classroom and online. And we offer free and affordable classes nationwide that cover the funding research process, proposal writing, grant makers and their giving, and of course related topics to that. And I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with us in our comprehensive grant seeking tool, the Foundation Directory Online. Well, we work to connect you, nonprofits, to the resources you need to thrive. And one of those resources is through webinars featuring guest speakers to discuss important topics surrounding other types of resource development and nonprofit management, like today's session on how to raise money from individuals with LAURENE FRANCOIS from Grassroots Institute on Fundraising Training. Before I introduce our esteemed guests, a few housekeeping notes for everyone. Today's session is being recorded and posted for future review at our website, grantspace.org. And there are also 3 handouts to download, and those are PDF files. You're welcome to download those in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. That includes our guest presenter's slide deck, as well as 2 articles of interest for your reading. And you're welcome to also type in your questions for our guest presenter in the Q&A chat box. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest today. Our guest, LAURENE FRANCOIS, is Training Director at Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training, and she develops grassroots fundraising curriculum for nonprofits and social justice organizations rooted in a fundraising, organizing approach and popular education model. LAURENE brings more than 5 years of experience as a trainer and fundraiser and is committed to supporting grassroots groups and leaders so that you can learn how to use relationships and raise funds effectively and to build and exercise community power. Thank you so much for joining us today, LAURENE. Please go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy and Sarah Jo, for help publicizing and also coordinating this training. I'm hoping that everyone who joins us today gets a lot of what they expected and then some. A little more about GIFT is that GIFT is a Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training. The work that we do is that we're also a national organization. We provide training, resources, and analysis to help organizations build strong fundraising programs that are mission-driven and sustainable and accountable to their communities. We focus especially on groups working in social justice issues based in working-class communities and communities of color. So many times there's not that many resources that organizations have. Some are small shops and medium-sized organizations. We work a lot with those organizations so they can be financially sustainable and they can continue the work that's needed for their communities. And I also help them grow to scale so that they can be doing more and have a larger impact within their communities and continue their work. Some of the different programs of GIFT include the Grassroots Fundraising Journal, which is on-the-ground strategies and templates and reflections from individuals who are practicing development. So these are staff, these are organizers, these are volunteers and board members, and again from small to mid-sized organizations. So these are like strategies that have been successful. They talk about the challenges and how to implement these strategies. They're a great tool and resource that folks can look forward to using, and many times folks continue to renew their subscription, and that's definitely a resource that I hope that folks will sign on for after the end of the webinar if they want to continue figuring out ways to continue their work, but also bring up to scale the program that they're doing. We have the Fundraising Academy for Communities of Color, which is based in LA in partnership with Compass Point Nonprofit Services. And again, we provide in-person training and consulting services because we know that the webinars are a really good first step in terms of identifying what needs to be done and what are the challenges you are facing as either an individual, as part of your organization, as a consultant. but we also need the in-person training to allow you to really delve deep into the work that's very specific to your own organization, to your own work that you're doing. It's really beneficial as well. And lastly, we have a bi-monthly conference. The conference is actually happening this year. Money for Our Movements Conference is a social justice fundraising conference this August 2nd and 3rd at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on at the end of the webinar. But let's get to the webinar. So the goals for this webinar, many of you read the description, is how to raise money from individuals. And that's a really advantage goal that we're going to be having to just really start the process. It will set you up with some languages, some key languages about how to make your ask to an individual. But before we can get to that, we need to break down some stereotypes about who gives and who gets, and to learn really the nuts and bolts about prospecting donors and how to get them more invested and interested in the work that you're doing. So we're going to be going through our fears and a little bit of our roadblocks. Landscape of philanthropy, raising money from people you know. Sometimes a lot of common mistakes, and these can be really addressed in just some nuts and bolts things that you should keep in mind as you invite people to have a conversation with you about the work that you're doing and asking them for your support. We're going to talk about, again, the language, the ways you have an actual conversation, and not just a one-sided conversation with an individual. Finally, we're going to have questions, a Q&A section. So as Sarah Joe said earlier, please type in your questions throughout this webinar, and I'll be taking your questions and replying to them at the end of the webinar. And then finally, we're going to do a recap and have some resources and evaluation for this webinar. So I just want to quickly, before we get started, to know who's in the room exactly with us. And you can just click, it's a one answer. So what role do you play in your organization? A lot of times we know that if you're working in a small shop organization or even a large one, that as an executive director, you take on majority amount of the fundraising, including grant writing, earned income strategies. You're formulating a lot of it. As board members, we have different roles in the organization, including governance and fundraising. Program staff, cool. So a lot of folks here are development staff, which is like, you are the bread and butter of the organization, keeping in terms of helping build capacities to continue the work that you're doing. So that's good to know that we have a lot of development staff and executive directors, and we're going to see how you all can work close, not just close together, but more effectively together in developing the next strategies and how to ask individuals for money. Cool, thanks. So again, we do a lot of in-person trainings, but so in our in-person trainings, we do a lot of making the ask and developing an infrastructure for strategies so that folks can continue fundraising in a way that's sustainable and that elevates the work that they're doing. But before we generally get into that, we have to name why is it so hard for us to ask money from each other. And oftentimes, the question about what ideas were you taught or told about money growing up, these are the responses that we generally get, that money doesn't grow on trees, not to actually talk about money. But this is our job to do, and oftentimes we are constantly inundated with options about how and where to spend our money, but yet we're also taught not to talk about it, right? To give money when you can, that money doesn't buy happiness. To save up your money, money is power. You work hard for your money. There's a lot of conflicting, a lot of similar different reasonings and ideas of what we were told about money, which carries on to us in our adult lives. And before we can ask other individuals for money, we have to recognize when we're asking board members, volunteers, our executive directors to make that major donor ask, to ask their friends to sign to be sustainers, that they're bringing all this ideas and notions with them to the table before they can even ask for money. So the question is, right, how do you feel when you ask for money? When you have all these ideas that you were taught, you grew up with, that you still bring into your adulthood, that into your life right now, you ask for money, a lot of times people say they feel dread. They feel powerless and scared, embarrassed, bothersome. These responses are not new to folks, right? You may get the 2 folks out of the 50 who say, I feel really excited, right? But generally, for the most part, this is a lot of the feelings that people, again, hold on. And this is why when you're asking your board members, your volunteers to be involved in your fundraising committee, or your fundraising strategy, it's not that many folks who are actually going to perform to what's needed to increase, one, to reach your fundraising goal, but also to make it to create a culture of fundraising, because they have all these different type of feelings that need to get addressed. So what do you do when you have these like type of emotions, right? You ask the question, how do you feel when you give money? The action, all this dread, fear, embarrassment, bothersome. What happens when you actually give money to individuals and causes you know and care about? You feel appreciated. You feel needed, satisfied, powerful, connected. These are totally opposite feelings and ideas than when we are the actor. So putting that on a butcher paper or a PowerPoint, or actually just having a conversation with individuals and getting them from that place of how does it feel to make the ask to how does it feel to give and to also be thanked, really helps create that starting point of like, oh, when I've given money to my friend, to an organization that I care about, I feel really like someone's like, I feel like I'm part of something bigger, right? Oftentimes you look at the fact that many of our individuals, of our friends, give away money all the time. There's a lot of impulse giving. There's a lot of like intentional, cared about giving. So just knowing that, what is the reason that people give? And what will be the reason they get to your organization? So that's the first start, right? Actually addressing people's internal fears and the psychology of how and why they give. But then the next part, folks are like, but my amount of money is probably not going to make a dent or mean as much as someone who gives 1,000 or 50,000, like, or it's not really going to help the organization, right? But then we think about how much money do you think was actually given away in charitable contributions in 2012? And folks, to answer that question, it's a multiple choice question. So think about that. With the economic recession that has happened, with the fact that you buy a lot of things on a daily basis, a lot of commercials, how much do you think was given away in charitable contributions? This includes money that is given to nonprofits, to foundations, to political campaigns. How much money do you think was given? Awesome. We're hitting the billion amounts. Oh, it's like a very close tie. So there's, thanks, so. We can minimize the polls. How much is actually being given? Actually, just before we do that, so I told you that all this amount of money. So I promise I will tell you the answer in 1 second, but I want to ask another question before we get there. So right now we have an idea that over 10 billion to 100 billion, possibly more than that, have been given away. Who do you think gives the most amount of this money? Yes. For folks who don't know, bequests are individuals who have passed on and are still given. So this includes folks who have planned giving, so wills, and then trust to them. A lot of foundations are often created through a planned giving or a bequest. That is awesome. I like that I'm working with a very smart, intelligent group of folks. So most of the contributions, you're right, comes from individuals. But how much money was given away in total charitable contributions? Over $316 billion was given away. And this information, you can see, is courtesy of Giving USA report. So that means in spite of the economic recession, in spite of the fact that people are making, we're moving into a place where people are making higher living wages, but that people are often, the middle class is shrinking, people are holding on 2 or more jobs, that individuals are still given much more of their money, are still given intentionally their money. So I just want to pause and let folks reflect on this for a second and see that oftentimes we spend a lot of our own time as executive directors, as development staff, looking to foundations for a lot of the support that we get to run our organizations. And it isn't, so I don't want to say not to look for foundations. Foundations are a really great source and provide a lot of wealth to support the work that we do. But just to note that it's really important for the sustainability of your organization to have multiple different income strategies so that you're not dependent on just one income strategy, right? So this 80% of individuals who are given out of 80% of individuals are given the most amount of money is $300-some billion. Where is this money coming from, right? Are they coming from rich, wealthy folks? Are they coming from poor, working class, middle class individuals? They're coming from every single individual. What's really interesting here is that actually it's a higher percentage of individuals who are making less than $20,000 who are giving away their earned income than folks who are making more than $100,000. Why is that the case? Why are folks giving much more of their money when they are not making enough, or they're not making as much as folks who are making six figures? Because the impact of the work means a lot to them. The closer you are to the organization's work and impact, the deeper the connection, and the fact that you will give more often to that organization because you are invested in its work, right? So again, who is given? So many of the gifts that are given are actually from people's earned income, not from assets, not from inheritance. They're from the work that people do. And this is just a breakdown of who is given and what the demographics look like. I think what really is important to pull out here is that in an economy where we're looking to a lot more millennial generation who are really strong in their giving, that 6 out of 10 people without a job are given, right? So the idea and the notion that we can't ask low-income people, that we can't ask our friends who are working part-time to donate is actually false, right? There's a lot of actually false mentalities we have about who we can ask for money from. So who we can ask for money from includes everybody, right? That people are going to be given different amounts, but that people will be given. So again, there's an abundance of money in the U.S., and a majority of that comes from individuals. And in order for your organization to be sustainable, you need to be looking to not just one income generating source, but to many. So a good way to think about that is to have 33% from both foundations, earned income strategies, and individuals all donating and all giving money, and you're looking to each one of these different strategies to secure income for your organization. The reason why it's important to have a grassroots fundraising strategy is that organizations that have greater resources and control about how that money is used. Grassroots fundraising, having an individual donor program is great unrestricted money, right? It's the money that you have the ability to do to make more travel, to go to different conferences that's necessary to build the professional development of your staff, and so that you can bring the work to a higher level degree, so that you can have more food for your meetings. For some small shop organizations, having food is a really big part of the culture for the organization, and not very often you can write that off as part of your work that you do in part of the deliverable that you write in a foundation, right? So it's just the amount of autonomy that's given when you have a grassroots fundraising program really helps set you up to do more of the work that you intentionally have set out to do. So I just wanted to set you up with that framework and about why is it so hard to get your own individuals, your volunteers, your board members, your other program staff to actually raise money. Because one, they have all these ideas that they were taught with, right? You're not supposed to talk about money. That money is power, and that oftentimes that folks with not a lot of wealth have power. And that to ask individuals for money feels bothersome, feels dreadful, feels embarrassed. But then we look and we see that actually folks who are working class, who are low income, give most amount of their money, right? That we as individuals make up, our giving is greater than foundations and corporations, and that we have a strong power to give. So who are the individuals that you're going to be asking money from then, right? Knowing that we have this. So in order to start to identify these individuals, the nuts and bolts of prospecting is really key. And this may be known to some folks, especially who are executive directors of development staff. The ABCs include ability to give, which we all know is everyone, right? Everyone can give a meaningful gift to them as long as they feel they are invested and there's an impact of the work that's garnered to them. Everyone, if there's so the ability to give, everyone, the belief, impact, the contact, and that's really important. So oftentimes we look to a lot of celebrities, folks we don't have a lot of contact with, to be givers, and that is definitely for some organizations where they need to be looking for. But for many of us, like, the starting point needs to be people we actually have relationships with, because as you'll hear from Mark Tony, and he is the author of the Development of Rap That Raises Money. One of the resources that you all are given is that a donation is the beginning of a relationship and not the end of a transaction. Mark Tony, the executive director of Turn and a Money Fire Movement volunteer, raised over $8,000 in his pitch because, one, he's very connected to the work that we do, but he also knows that it's about bringing people so you can build a base. Fundraising is a part of building a base of your community and growing that, right? So I'm going to go back and forth in the next two slides. So I just want to give folks a heads up on that. So we said, again, ability to give, your belief in the organization, and your contact. Here's a very simple prospecting sheet that you can actually give your volunteers, stakeholders in your organization, advisors, board members, to help begin cultivation and growing your fundraising base and also your community base. Because not every one of these individuals are going to give money, but there are actually a lot of resources that individuals can give, both money, time, talent. Like, think about fundraising in terms of both monetary donations, but as well as what are the tangible in-kind donations that people can give. Like, do you need a space to hold your next conference, or for your meeting, or for your gallery, especially if you work in the arts and cultural work? Like, do you need a space for a concert? Do you need a really good chef? We actually have a lot more connections than we think about, and different types of acts that we can make of individuals to get them more involved in the organization. So using this sheet, it's really helpful to have the name of the potential donor, right? Thinking about folks who can actually give money to your organization, the name of the potential donor, who is the contact of this relationship, how are they going to bring them in, do they have a belief in the organization, like what would be their connection to it, and have they given money to organizations in the past? So knowing your donor's history, and this, because it's one person writing it down, the information here is easier to track because most of the time they will actually know this information. A lot of time as development staff, as executive directors, we're doing a lot of prospect research that's based on using Google, different like paid prospect and sharing lists. But a lot of times the easiest way to get people involved in the work is to look to your program staff, your board, your volunteers, ask them to write 5 names. Not a whole lot, but what are 5 people that they can intentionally reach out to in the next month or prior to your next campaign, or in hopes to invite them to an event that you have upcoming, right? And then how much can you ask them for, and by what method? Is for millennials, is doing a social media campaign. Will a social media campaign be more effective? Or if they're part of the older community, if they're a Gen Y or a baby boomer, will mail be more appropriate in terms of making the ask? Will face-to-face conversation be more appropriate in terms of making the ask? But having a simple contact sheet like this and asking for a very realistic number in terms of what people can do in terms of their outreach, because you don't want to add more work, one, to your own self. You have a lot of work already. You manage a lot. So asking people, name 5 people that you want to bring into the organization because, one, you have been impacted by the work that's being done. What is your investment in the organization? And that right there reminds people of why they want to tell and talk about the work that you are doing. Fundraising is in a way a fundraiser is in a way an ambassador of your organization, right? Because they're constantly communicating the work that you're doing. So again, moving back to that previous slide, fundraising is then about building relationships. right? It's about talking about the different resources, both monetary and beyond money, that folks can bring in to the organization. So being really clear, like the next event that you have, like honestly, like maybe you don't want to put down $2,000, $10,000 for a space. What you can do instead is create a prospect list about individuals and you can include, again, volunteers, advisors, board members, programmers, your own actual friends, right? Because you're in this work. Like maybe they actually know a gallery. Their friend of a friend is an owner of a gallery, right? That you can actually hold your event space there for free. And what would be helpful is that owner of the gallery gets more publicity because you're bringing a whole lot more face to their work. So it's about making those connections and knowing that you don't actually have to be the holder of all the information. You're not going to know everyone is going to require to raise the money, but you know enough people who are going to ask enough people to raise the money you need for the work that you are doing. So what are the common mistakes we make in our asks? So a lot of times we generally cash the check before we even thank the donors for making the contribution. It is really easy to do that. You're like very excited about reaching the goal that you plug the money in, and a thank you is never actually given. Thank yous are as simple and as mundane as it feels. Is actually a really easy way to build and cultivate a donor. Because again, going back to the earlier notion that it's really hard for people to ask. But when people give and they are thanked, they feel much more a part and invested in the work that you're doing, right? So in order to create a culture of just fundraising, of making that ask, get into the culture, just start thanking people. Writing a thank you note of thank-a-thon phone banks are really just perfect small ways to get people prepped in order to get people more comfortable in terms of making the ask. Then communicating with your donors outside of asking for money. Too often we are not in contact with our donors, so this can just be like a simple e-drop, like an email communication, letting them know what you're up to. No ask, right? Just keeping them informed. And this could be a quarterly thing, and it can be as fine as quarterly, monthly, but generally quarterly is ideal, or at least 2 to 3 times in the year to let folks know what you're up to before dropping your next appeal in them. And finally, it's really important, right, to know your audience. Who are you asking? Is your major donor program encompassed with your regular campaign, or are you trying to have a separate campaign directed towards them? Are you trying to have a campaign that's directed solely to your volunteer base, right? So understanding the different ways that people come to your organization, right? Tracking that information about they came to this event, they signed up here, is really important information, and it can be simple as Excel sheets sometimes, or there are really great databases like Neon, Donor Perfect, who are really good in terms of keeping track of information. It's just the time it takes to actually plug in the information. So getting geared into preparing to make our ask, right? This is, how do you make that ask now? For one, find a location that's both private and comfortable for both you and the individual. And sometimes it's as easy as a coffee shop, or bringing them over to your office, if that makes sense. Many times for a major donor visit, we ask individuals to come over to our office so that, one, this is our home base, and we want to let them know this is where the magic happens. And you don't want to let the major donor in a time where it's really busy and it feels more of a distraction than an actual convenience for you. Because major donors, individuals, regardless, they wanna support their work that you're doing. They don't want to be a burden, they don't want to be a distraction to the work. They want you to continue the work that you're doing, and making a financial donation is just one way that they feel like they can support the work you're doing. So you're asking your friends, your volunteers, your advisors, your board members to make an ask. So maybe not every single person will be making a major donor ask. They're asking their friends. So individuals who are going to give $50, $100, telling them, find a place like a coffee shop the next time they're going to go out for drinks, someplace or in their own living room or over the phone, someplace that's going to be private and comfortable for them, and letting the person know that they're going to be met with making an ask. So language around that is as simple as, hey, this is the work I'm doing, and I would like to ask for your support for an upcoming campaign. Will you be down to sit down with me and have a conversation? Because support can look like a monetary donation. Support can also look like, again, an in-kind donation. And support finally also looks like, are there other individuals that you think that will be good to reach out to get more involved in the work that we're doing? Next, having materials. You don't need to overwhelm. People don't want to be overwhelmed. You don't want to be overwhelmed with information, right? So neither does the person you're reaching out to. So having only 2 print materials is actually perfectly okay. If you would know more than anyone, or the volunteer, the person who is making the contact, who is making the ask, is going to know more than anyone how much information is going to be necessary to bring to the ask, right, to the meeting. Finally, making concrete next steps and follow-up plans to keep the person engaged, even if they can't give financially. So if your ask is going to be financial and the person is not going to be able to make that donation, and we'll go into why people say no's or maybes in a minute, but having concrete ways for them to get involved. So that way they know that you're not thinking about them in just a monetary, or you're not just thinking about them as if they're an ATM. You're like, I'm being intentional about trying to get you more involved in the work. Because again, fundraisers are ambassadors of the work that you're doing. So you want to get them involved in the work in multiple different tiers and levels. And then finally, be prepared to ask for a specific amount, right? And get comfortable saying that amount out loud. So if your volunteer, if your board member if you are only right now comfortable in making up to $1,000 ask, be comfortable in saying the word $1,000. Would you be interested in supporting the work that we're doing by making a donation of $1,000 today? If you don't feel comfortable making an ask of $10,000 of whatever the amount is, it's okay to stutter sometimes and to come with the anxiousness and fidgetiness, but you want to be able to come confident and that you want this, that you know the importance of this money. If you're tripping over your words as you make the ask for the amount, folks are going to look at you and not think that the amount you're asking, one, feels right, and there'll be much more questions more about the amount of money than to actual the reasons why, right? So practice what amount feels comfortable for you making your ask. The framing and the messaging. So you're sitting down with your individual, or the volunteer, the board member, your contact is sitting down with a person that they're ready to make an ask of. The way to frame the message, right? A conversation with an individual can take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Then you want to plan for an hour, and you don't want to go over an hour because then, I mean, if you're going over an hour, it's less of the ask already has been made way into the hour-long conversation. Now you just chit-chatting, which is great for cultivation, for knowing more about why this person want to get involved. But you want to generally plan for 30 minutes to an hour-long conversation. And the way to the way to frame the conversation and to message your ask is, again, let them know. So starting off with the intro and the connection. Who are you to your organization? So for volunteers, be honest about this is the reason and how I got involved in the work. And that's a really good setup for one, building your own confidence and making you feel settled and at ease in the conversation, right? To be like, this is, and a good reminder for what brings you into the work. What is your motivation to continue and staying in this work by saying who you are and where you came from and what is your relationship to your organization. And then asking about the individual, what's their connection to the organization. So if this is the first time you're talking to this individual, maybe a financial ask is not actually the right ask. So generally you would know more about this person's connection to the organization. You'll know that their parents are longtime supporters of this work. You'll know that if the issue is around economic justice, so living wages is important to them, then you'll know that they're working a part-time job, or if they're working 2 jobs, and that meeting ends meet is a real difficulty for them, and they have other family members that also go through this. But you can make that connection, right? So knowing that contact and that relationship is really important in terms of framing that conversation. Context. Again, the print material that you're bringing to the meeting is the same thing as the context. You don't want to overwhelm people and inundate them with a lot of information. You do want to be clear with your mission statement, with the work that you're doing. So name one accomplishment and one fight one goal that your vision that your organization is working towards, right? That way, you have like a place where the potential donor can have a conversation with you, right? And many times, as for Gift and many of you all here, that you have multiple different programs. Generally, a lot of you all have about 3 programs you're working on. You don't need to talk about each one of them in depth, right? The person who you're talking with, you'll have an idea before you even sit down with them what's going to be most relevant to where they're at. You want to definitely give them a little overview about the other programs that you're doing, but you're going to know, like, this is actually the work that they're going to be most interested in, so I'm going to be prepared to let them know more about that work. Next, you're going to move into the crunch. Reminding people of the shared values and asking for a specific amount, and this is where it gets a little hard for folks, is to wait for a response, right? So people are going to give. Again, people give from all different types of income levels. From folks who are making less than $20,000 to folks who are making $100,000, they give at all different ranges. And we need to know what they can give. But generally, a lot of time, it's our best guesstimate. And that's real talk, right? And that's something that we all know working in the field. A lot of times we have either before, if this is the first time we're having a conversation with them, we're not going to be exactly sure how much to ask them for, but we're going to have a range. So starting higher is best, so that way, and we'll go into how to follow up with no's and maybes, but starting a little higher, not dramatically higher, because one, you don't want to overwhelm them and be like, wow, the amount they're asking, I can't even begin to imagine giving. Instead, it's like the amount that they're asking makes me uncomfortable, but uncomfortable to like they must really need this amount, right? But then actually waiting, not negotiating with the individual about how much to give. This is not a car sales pitch, right? Or transaction. This is like trying to get someone involved to make a donation in the work and to get involved in the work, period. So you start with the introduction, you're moving into the context, the work that you're doing, and you're making the ask, the amount that you're asking for, and then the catapult, thanking that person for their time and their donation and asking how to stay in contact with them, right? No matter what, whether the person says no, or if your ask is not a financial contribution, it's a in-kind donation, thanking that person for considering it, and knowing that if they came to the table, one, it's already more likely that they're going to it's going to be a yes. And then secondly, that if they said no, you can follow up with them and have a plan of action to have them still be engaged in the work that you're doing. So that's where that follow-up comes in, right? What are the ways the donor needs to be followed up with? And make a note of that and letting them know that it may not actually be you. You may not be the best person to follow up with them. Maybe there are questions they've asked that you need to go back to your team and find those answers out. Follow-up to any meeting should be done in 2 to 3 days. So even if the information that you're trying to gather actually is going to take longer than that, letting the person know that, hey, I'm still checking in on that information, but letting that person know within the 2 to 3 days of your meeting is really important. So one, keep that memory really fresh in their minds of meeting with them, but also letting them know that they feel that you're being responsive to them. So this is a really good statistics around face-to-face asks. Will always be the best way in terms of effective strategy to get people to donate. There are a lot of great strategies, and one which is not here is like going online and making the ask. And generally that's an easy ask sometimes, right? Because if you're not really good at your online, if you're not really tech savvy, then that's not going to be a really good place for you. Face-to-face ask is the best and the most effective strategy because, one, people feel like, one, you've made an intentional decision to reach out to them versus other people, or in addition to other people, that the work that you're doing is important enough that you're going to follow up with them and that you thought about them to get involved in the work. Right? There's like a personal connection, and they feel really important because you thought about them, or your board member or your volunteer or someone in your organization who's already impacted by the work thought about them. So why do people say no and maybe? So generally the reasons are that they can't donate how much is being asked of them. Or they have more questions they need to follow up with. They need to consult with their partner before donating. I want to pull out, generally sometimes the reason is that the relationship and trust isn't there yet, and it's a premature ask. So oftentimes we're asking people to be a major donor before they even have come to an event, or we feel like just because they've been on our mailing list for about a year that, and again, they haven't donated, right? But we're going to ask them to donate at a very high level. Like, we need to be more intentional about what's the ask we're making, and this is part of the stewardship, right? About what are the different entry points we're trying to get people involved. And we don't need to create new work as part of our fundraising. In your program, what are the different ways that people are already getting involved, and how can you connect their involvement into making a donation? So other reasons why people say no is that there have been bad money management and leadership of the organization in the past. So when you're sitting down with that individual, it's going to be important actually to have a truthful conversation about what's going to be the new ways folks are going to be approaching that. And you don't need to be, so that conversation prior with your board, with your volunteers, your stakeholders, to know like what's the language you're going to be using to address that issue, right? And then finally, they may not just agree with the approach or strategy because maybe who they want to give money to is for the more direct services. Maybe they want to give money actually for education-based than for trainings, right? You're going to know this information as you develop a relationship with that individual. But again, your contact, the person who's going to be asking the other individual, they're going to have a relationship with them. And so some of this is already going to be known. So the reason why face-to-face ask is so effective, because most of this information is already known before the ask is even made. But none of these reasons that people say no or maybe are reflections of the person. They're all outside of the person's control. Like none of them literally say, it's because I don't like you that I'm not giving that money. Because again, we're going back to that people feel so much personal attachment to money, and they feel really like it bothers them. But if they say no, it's not because they don't like you as a person. It's because of all these different things that, like, in their own personal lives, or they need to know more information about your organization. So lastly, before we get into the Q&A section, is how to respond to the no's and maybes. So your potential donor says, no, I cannot donate. I'm sorry. The next thing you should ask them is just ask them, like, can I ask you why? That way, again, the reason why you're in this conversation with someone in the first place is because you want to get them involved in the work that you're doing, and this is one way that you know that they can get involved. So asking this is very specific language that you can ask. And know that, so what I wrote down in terms of no, I cannot donate, sorry, most of the times, about 90% of the times, people will give you the reason why they can't donate if you wait for a response, right? That people feel actually bad for not being able to give because they're already sitting down with you. Again, because before you're making your ask, you're doing all this legwork. You're sending them an email out to let them know that you need their support, that you have made intentional, that you have a relationship with them. So by the time they get to the table with you, they know that you're asking them different types of things for a monetary amount, for an in-kind donation. And they're going to actually worse off than you feel bad for hearing them no. But again, they're going to let you know why. And if they don't, you can very simply ask, what is the reason why you can't donate in a very compassionate way. And again, since it's someone you know, that's going to intuitively come out. But if not, these are some of the different ways to respond to no's and maybes. So if the amount is too high, right, is there an amount that would feel comfortable, that would make you feel comfortable giving? Or let them know that if you have a sustainer program, right, a monthly giving program, that they can actually give that $1,000 in payments or installments of 2 or 4, right? And you can plan for that to support your next fundraising campaign. If they're not sure, ask them more about, like, is there anything about the work, or is there another program that you had more questions about to help you decide about whether you can give or not? If the answer is still no, then still thanking them for taking the time to talk with you, right? And know that a no now doesn't mean it's not a no forever. If they came to the conversation, if they decided to sit down with you, then you already know that they are an investor, that they want to be part of the work that you're doing, right? Also, normalizing hearing no's. You are doing actually a good job, and oftentimes people look very puzzled when I say this, but you're actually doing a good job when you are hearing no's often. That means you're asking enough people. Generally, we actually don't ask enough people, so we don't hear all the no's. I mean, it's not to say we don't want to hear yeses. We definitely want to hear yeses. But, again, the ratio is 50-50, right? So in a larger context, 1 out of every 4 people are going to say yes to you, right? If your donor list is like starting from 100 and more, 1 out of every 4 of those individuals that you're asking and you're following up with will say yes to you, okay? So this is some of the wrap-up, but fundraising is about building relationships, and that your fundraisers are your ambassadors of your organization. You do not have to create new work for you. Integrate the program. So what entry points already are there for people you to ask for money? That face-to-face ask is the most effective strategy for raising money and creating meaningful, lasting relationships. Once you're in a conversation with someone about and ask them to donate, whether or not they can or cannot donate, you can always ask them are there other individuals you think would be interested in getting more involved in the work? That's why communications and development work so hand in hand together, because you're constantly messaging the work that you're doing. Knowing your audiences and coming prepared, but not inundated, not overwhelming them with information is really important. And then letting your passion be greater than your fear for asking for money. Knowing that the work that you're doing is important to the community that you're working with, remembering the reason why you applied for the job that you're in, remembering the people who are benefited, who are impacted by the work, is important in terms of making you feel more comfortable and confident when you're sitting down with somebody and asking them for a donation. Knowing that also, that yes, you're going to feel dread, embarrassment before you make that ask, if you don't remember the fact that when people, and then when you give, you generally feel really, and when you give and you feel really appreciated, that you feel really empowered and really part of something bigger, that you help shape and help make something happen that was not just part of your own, that you are part of something larger than yourself. So I want to take time now for any questions that there may be. And hope that this part of asking people for money before we get into Q&A is definitely something that requires practice, but there are a lot of different framing of your languages that you can do to start be more effective in terms of asking for donations, but also that mentality, right, that psychology of why do we need to ask our people for money, and that actually our people give and are constantly asked, that it is not our responsibility to make the decision for people whether or not they cannot give. It is our responsibility as fundraisers to ask, right? And that people are impacted in multiple different ways, and they will give money when they can and they want to. So, questions?
Thanks, Laurene. Sound advice all around, and I think you can expect a virtual applause right now. And the questions are coming in, and as a reminder, please enter your questions in the Q&A chat box. We already have a number of them lined up. And I'm going to try and kind of group them in different categories just so we can make the most use of our time. We have about 11 minutes or so for questions. As we mentioned earlier, this will be this is being recorded, and we'll post it to our Grant Space page for future viewing and contemplation. Laurene, one question came through which I thought was really appropriate for everyone on the call, and this is Saul Soto's question. What's the best way to leverage boards, staff, volunteers, or motivate them to go and ask their potential prospects? So your advice was, we need a list of 5 individual prospects from each of you or something like that. Do we tell them to introduce? Do we tell them to introduce us, or let them handle the ask?
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good question. So it's going to be, I'm going to give you a couple of different responses based on the types of individuals. For boards, so it's going to depend on how actively engaged your boards are right now. And that's going to range for a lot of different people. But a really good step into creating a culture of fundraising is to develop an individual board development plan So all that is, and it doesn't have to be a really fancy one, but letting board members know what's your fundraising activities for the year going to look like, and then having them commit to, so if it's 5 fundraising activities, and fundraising activities also includes cultivation events, so like phone calls, or maybe phone calls doesn't actually match the way the organization works, but there are events, but having board members take on 2 to 3 of those 5 different fundraising cultivation events or asks, and then go into them following up with them during those times. For volunteers, it's going to be really important for actually let them make the ask, but train them beforehand, right? So very much like when you think, so oftentimes the only time we train people is before a big special event, like a gala. We like have a training, we have a host, like there's a host committee, and we provide them a lot of materials. So think about it like similar like that, providing people with the training and support they need so that they can be successful. So letting folks know if you're going to have, have your volunteers involved in your next campaign, letting them know like these are the 2 dates where I'm going to be giving you information about how to prospect and how to make the ask. Right? Actually go through that handout, that section of the webinar about how to actually make your ask, and let folks know that we're going to be able to help you do that so they actually feel more comfortable making the ask, and let them do that. Because because fundraising is about relationships, they're going to be the best and most appropriate person to make the ask. And they're going to know how much to ask those individuals. So letting them prospect and also writing a donation amount, right, next to those, because again, that little prospecting sheet also says how much to ask for and what method. That way they can also create their own fundraising goal. Hopefully that answers the questions of who should be making the ask. For board members, you're going to be giving them the information, generally a lot of the time the contact list, but sometimes depending on what different fundraising activities you have lined up for the year, your ask may be for them to bring in their own contacts. For volunteers, you're going to let them be the person making the ask, but you're going to support them prior to making the ask. You're going to show them how to make a prospect sheet of just 5 people as a starting point, or 10, or whatever makes sense for your organization and the campaign you have, and have them set their own fundraising goal.
Great. And there's a few questions that are circulating around the same kind of sentiment that have to do with making the ask. So let's stay on that topic. Masharika, I apologize if I did not say your name correctly. She's asking, do you have advice or templates on how to tailor an ask based on a person's background or motivations? And kind of a follow-up question to that is around, how do you know how much, how do you estimate the amount of a donation to ask for? Mm-hmm. So there's a few thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So I'll start with the last question and work backwards. Sorry. So again, money time is going to be your best guesstimate. And I know that feels really uncomfortable to hear and to know, but that's really the truth. So so the person who's making the ask, especially if if you're asking people you already know, you're going to have a sense of what if they have a job, what type of job they're doing, how much they may end up making. A safe bet, there's no actually safe bets, but the relationship has to be there, right? So you're going to know how much, when you go out to a coffee or the next time so think about it this way, sorry. The easiest way to think about how much to ask somebody is if you know the person personally, the last time you went out for dinner, how much did you all spend? And then add $10. Because again, fundraising is about building relationships, right? The person making the ask is going to know the most amount of information about that individual. If you do not know this person you're asking, so if a volunteer or board member, here are 5 people I know, I actually don't want to make the ask. Hopefully that's not the case, but that you're like, maybe they feel like they're not the best person to make the ask. They feel like someone higher up in your organization needs to make the ask for them. Asking that volunteer or board member who gave you their names to say, how much do you think is appropriate to ask them? Because you're not going to know the information. They're going to. And even then, they're going to make a guesstimate. You're not going to know what's the most appropriate ask until you make that first ask and you start building that repertoire with your relationship, that potential donor, and then start asking about what do they generally feel comfortable with. After the second, third donation, you'll actually start to have a given history about what's their given ranges. in terms of the question prior, the first question you asked, if we have any templates about how to tailor your ask to a particular individual giving range, we do. You can find that in our Grassroots Fundraising Journal. And it's actually an archive that you can find and go through on our website, grassrootsfundraising.org. There's a section called, I'm pretty sure it's like individual prospecting and making the ask. And there's some really good templates that you can use for that. But many times it's just the template that I gave you is going to be the best, your best starting point if this is your first ask to somebody.
Fantastic. And the article you're referring to that people can download right now is called Developing a Wrap.
Yeah.
That raises money. Sorry, I'm making the screen bigger so I can read it. Oh, perfect, good. So definitely download those. They're fantastic articles.
And there's also the training. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There's also the resource Understanding Your Donor's Motivation, which is a training exercise that you can use and go through to understand who's your audience, right? And where are the different entry points for them that they'll be coming into the organization.
Fantastic. And there are so many great questions. Oh, my gosh. Well, the good news for you guys is if we don't get a chance to address everyone's here, we are going to continue the conversation with Laurene on GrantSpace, and you can pose your comments and questions there, and she'll respond today and tomorrow. So, yeehaw for that. Aaliyah is asking a great question. I'm actually going to kind of position Crystalline and Aaliyah's question together for you, Laurene. This is more of a tangible question. Ideas, best way to turn a person who makes an in-kind donation and turning that into a monetary donation or a monetary donor. And then maybe you can package that with this question from Aaliyah. Can you share a few real-life stories from your experience making the ask? A success story where you got a yes, and maybe a less than successful story where you learned something. Thoughts on that? If nothing comes to mind, certainly, but I just thought that was a great question that would be useful for everyone.
Yeah. So for the how to turn an in-kind donation into a monetary donation. So again, this goes back to making sure the ask is not premature. So I think that's always going to be a good setup because that's never going to be a premature ask. So a good time to ask someone who's given an in-kind donation is to compact it into the next fundraising event that you're going to be having, but doing it in a way that it's prior to the actual launch of the event, of the fundraising campaign. So like you're planning a fundraising campaign that's going to be in June, you're asking them sometime in May to be one of the first 25 people or first 12 people to give a donation, and framing that in that, I know you've been giving this in-kind donation, I don't know, like maybe it's for like a few months or a very particular time you gave us in-kind donation. We'd love for your next donation to be a monetary donation. But also, it's basically framing and packaging their ask in a way that it's part of a small group of folks we're reaching out to that's going to support this next larger work that we're doing. Because it sounds like, right, if people are consistently giving in-kind donation, this is how they feel most comfortable that they can give, but it does not mean that they cannot give a monetary donation. They just need to be asked a different time, or you can always ask, like, can you also give? But generally, the former is better of following up the in-kind donation with a monetary ask that's going to be part of another fundraising campaign that you have upcoming. In terms of my own personal experience, so I volunteer for an organization based here in Oakland called Bay Area Girls Rock Camp. They're this really great organization which provides like day summer camps for young girls to practice musical instruments, and they end up creating a band. They have a live performance at a club. This is for young girls between the ages of 13 to 18. And I got involved with it because I like to sing, and I have no musical instruments, but I just like to sing, and I have a lot of great artist friends. A lot of my friends are musicians, artists, MCs, and it was great to have I just know for me myself, it's a great space for young girls to develop that area of learning, and this is a fun space for them. So I was a roadie. That's how I got involved in the work that they're doing. And they have a bowl-a-thon where they raise money for financial aid for young girls to attend their summer camps. I asked some of my friends to a very particular ask, actually. Asked one of my friends is a musician and an MC to be an MC for their what is it called? Their showcase. And they said yes to being the MC to the showcase. And it was really great and exciting. And I didn't I didn't ask them for a monetary donation because it didn't make sense at the time. And I didn't think so. They came back to me like during our conversation. They were like, "Oh, I also know that you're going through a fundraising campaign. How come you didn't hit me up for money?" And since they know my occupation, they actually like called me out of like, "How come you didn't ask them for money?" And I was like, "Oh, I thought this would be a better ask of you." They're like, "Yeah, but I could also like donate $25. Like it just made sense." So that was a really good awakening call for myself. Sometimes I feel like I make the appropriate ask for individuals. I make one ask of individual where I can sometimes make two asks. So that was really like kind of like a mind-blowing situation. So now I make, for things that I think make sense, I make two asks. One time that it didn't go so well, yes, because, hearing no's is a hard but like real reality thing. I asked Jenny, right? I asked my friend Jenny, and you don't really need to know her name, but to support some of my work for, wow, was it GIFT? Yeah, to support my work for GIFT, the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training. And she said it was for our end-of-year fall campaign last year. She's based in New York. I'm based in San Francisco. And she told me, I asked her to donate XYZ amount of money. And she told me no, because she's like, I don't live in New York, and I know that you're a national organization, but it just doesn't make sense for me because I just don't work in nonprofits. And I was like, word. I mean, I was just trying to reach out to a lot of folks. It was my first giving campaign, my first fundraising campaign for GIFT, and I was just hitting up a lot of my folks. And I thought it made sense because I was like, you're one of my friends, and it's a national organization, and we basically have to train other trainers or basically be like a teacher to different folks. And she was like, I know that from our relationship, she's more interested in like LGBTQ work and around domestic violence work. So when I've asked her to donate to organization which I'm on the board for San Francisco Against Rape, she's donated. So I just felt like, she just knows that I can hit her up for money around the different works I do. But when she told me, like, actually this ask doesn't make sense to me, I kind of started thinking about, not all my asks for people on the East Coast make sense just because of the work that I do, and they're not involved in nonprofit work. So I think those are two really good learning points for me. One, I can make two asks from individuals, especially when it's something that they're going to be present at a fundraising event. Like, I think that's what I took away from the Bowl-a-thon, that, of course, I should ask her for money. She was going to be at the fundraising event. And then for my friend Jenny around GIFT, that it doesn't make sense even if your work is a national organization, to ask people from all different locations, because the topic doesn't make sense.
Well, thank you for sharing those stories with us, Laurene. I think they're all very valuable to all of us listening. And I want to wrap up the Q&A portion and really ask for folks to fill out the survey. It takes about 5 seconds. I'm going to fast forward to this slide, and hopefully that's opening up on your screen. And apologies if it's opening up like 10 times. But I want to make sure that everyone is able to share their feedback about this webinar session, as well as giving us ideas for future ones that you'd like to attend. And I also mentioned that there is a link here that you can also click on and have immediate access to the content and to continuing the conversation with Laurene. I do want to put in a plug, and you probably do too, Laurene, for the conference coming up, Money for Movements in Baltimore. Do you want to say more about that and more about the resources on the screen?
Yeah, so Money for Movements conference is a grassroots fundraising conference. It's our 5th biannual conference. It's a really huge conference, about 700 people who attend the conference nationwide and some internationally. We have workshops that talk to the politics and principles of fundraising, from skills building workshops about how to engage your board and volunteers in fundraising, to how to use your databases and grow them, to incorporate all the different types of constituencies that you have and you're working with, and also how do you use communication, online fundraising, and social media to publicize the work that you're doing and also integrate that to fundraising. So it's a really great, it's a 2-day conference in Baltimore. You have a lot of networking opportunities to meet people who are doing similar and different work and you can learn from. But really, one of the most exciting things that people always tell us about is that we're really engaged in debate. Our first year debate, we threw marshmallows at the debaters if we agreed or disagreed with what they were saying. At the most recent one, we did away with the marshmallows because that ended up being a little too messy of a cleanup. But now we do placards, and it's a really lively debate. The last debate at the conference we had was talking about whether nonprofits are a vehicle or a hindrance to the social justice movement, and that was a really great conversation, because sometimes you just don't have the time to get into these really deep conversations we want to have about not just our work but the greater, larger movement. We also provided the conference 30 minutes free consulting with different individuals who are consulting who have expertise in different areas, from earned income strategies to capital campaigns to board member engagement to working in the arts and culture, to getting youth and young people involved in the work. Lastly, I think I would say that the conference is a place where folks who are just getting started in development work are really have a place to learn more. But then folks who are weathered, who are veterans, so who have been working in this field for about over 10 years, have a really good opportunity to advance their knowledge and the work that's being done. And we welcome a lot of people. Registration is open now, and there's a discount for folks who apply who have 5 more people, and it doesn't have to be from your same organization who apply. It's a $100 discount from the registration. Lastly, for other resources that we have is our newsletter. It's a free. It's like once every other month. You'll get an e-newsletter with free fundraising tips. You sign up, and then again the Grassroots Fundraising Journal. You can go. It's online as well, but we do send out a print edition of just templates, real life reflections and experiences, bombed, like straight up, like this was a disaster event, like just so you have some real experiences about what works and what doesn't work on the field for organizations like you all. And again, training and consulting services. So if you want to have an in-person training and get more detailed advice and consulting about the work that you're doing and how to move that to how to deepen that work and then expand it, then you can talk to myself about how to bring gifts to the work that you're doing and how we can help you. There's a video that you can check out. It's a cool 3-minute video, or there's a 1.5 minute in the accessibility committee, which is awesome. So we have a Spanish monolingual chat, as well as we're going to have ASL interpreters at the conference, and so our accessibility committee is awesome, and they created a 1-minute video for why you should come to the conference. You should check that out. It's on our website.
Check it out, everyone. And I also want to just share, let me fast forward the slide, and then we have to wrap up. Apologies for going over, but I have a feeling this is all extremely valuable information for everyone on the call, and we will post the recording of this webinar for you to share with board members and staff and fellow volunteers. And you can continue the conversation with Lorraine from GIFT on GrantSpace. I posted the link there. It's also on the slide. And so she will be checking in and commenting on questions and responding. So just go ahead and you can put in your questions and comments in that page. Mm-hmm. And I just, again, a sincere, genuine thank you, Lorraine, for spending your morning with us today and for all of the work that you do at GIFT. We are all so grateful. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Have a great afternoon.
Bye.